I'm George Lutz. They say home is where the heart is, but our dream home in Amityville became a living nightmare. I remember the day we moved into 112 Ocean Avenue. The winter chill couldn't dampen our spirits, nor could the shadow of the house's history. A tragedy where the previous occupant, Ronald DeFeo Jr., had murdered his family. We were told about it, sure. But Kathy and we didn't believe in ghosts. We believed in second chances. The house was imposing, with its Dutch colonial architecture and windows that resembled half-closed eyes. It had a boathouse and sat off the banks of a canal, a picturesque postcard of suburban tranquility. Yet from our first night, the atmosphere felt charged, heavy, like the air before a storm. It's not easy to explain what living in a haunted house feels like, especially when you don't believe in hauntings. It starts with denial. The cold spots on a warm night, the odd smells, the fleeting shadows, you rationalize them. But then, the things you can't rationalize begin to happen. Kathy saw them first. Her vivid dreams of the murders played in her sleep like a macabre movie, waking her in a scream-stifled terror. I'd calm her down, telling her it was just a dream, but the seed of doubt was planted. It wasn't just the cold spots, or the foul smells that seemed to have no source. We witnessed things that defy explanation. One night, as Kathy levitated off our bed, I saw her, surrounded by a greenish glow, the same eerie light that seeped from the walls on days when the house felt alive with malice. I heard the disembodied voices, whispers in the dead of night that called out in a language I couldn't understand. They seemed to emanate from the basement, where we found that hidden red room. Its walls painted in what looked like blood. Harry, our faithful companion, would whimper and cower, refusing to set a paw near it. Our children were not spared from the horror. They'd wake, crying in the night, speaking of shadowy figures looming over their beds. And Jody, the imaginary friend who wasn't so imaginary. I caught a glimpse of those haunting red eyes staring back at me from a window one night. They held a knowing look, as if mocking our attempts to rid the house of its darkness. Then there were the illnesses, the unexplained bruises and scratches that appeared on our bodies. The house was toying with us, exerting its influence, and we were powerless against it. The Warrens felt it too, the malevolent force that gripped the house. They warned us of the danger, but by then we were already in too deep. We knew we had to leave, to escape the grips of the Amityville house before it claimed us, as it had claimed the DeFeos. It was a race against time, against an entity that seemed to feed on our fear. We left everything behind in our flight. Possessions, memories, a piece of our very souls. The Amityville house remains etched in my mind, a symbol of pure, unadulterated horror. Even now, I sometimes wake in the dead of night, gasping, the echo of those whispers still in my ears, the chill of unseen hands upon my skin. The horror followed us, lingering like a specter that refuses to be laid to rest. Our children felt it too. They'd never had trouble sleeping, yet here they were, wide-eyed and restless night after night. Our daughter's new friend, Jody, seemed innocent enough until I realized no one else could see her. Was it just an imaginary friend? We tried to believe so until Jody's antics became too strange to ignore. Objects moving, doors slamming, and the peculiar glowing red eyes at her bedroom window. The infamous red room in the basement. That was my undoing. Hidden behind shelving, it exuded a malevolence that seemed ancient, a stark contrast to the rest of the house. Harry, our dog, wouldn't even come near it, and that's when I truly began to fear. Animals sense these things, they said, and Harry was more than just a pet. He was our sentinel, and he was afraid. Days passed, each one more harrowing than the last. I found myself changing, my temper shorter, as if the house was slowly seeping into my soul. Kathy changed too. Her once bright eyes now mirrored the fear that had taken residence in our hearts. The house, it seemed, was alive, breathing along with us, watching us with those window eyes. The tipping point came one night when the terror became tangible. Kathy was levitating above our bed, her body rigid, and her face contorted in fear. I reached out to her, my hands trembling, and as I pulled her down, a voice, guttural and filled with malice, laughed. It wasn't a sound I'd ever heard before or since, a sound that had no place in the living world. We sought help, reaching out to the church, to paranormal experts, anyone who would listen. But it was as if the house had erected a barrier, a bubble of the otherworldly, and within it, we were alone with the entity. The Warrens, noted paranormal investigators. They came. They felt the presence, the dark force that permeated the very fabric of the house. They warned us, said the house was dangerous, that we were in danger. But by then, we already knew. We couldn't stay. Not after what happened. One does not simply live with the supernatural, not when it's malevolent. There was no fighting it, no reclaiming of the house. It belonged to the dead, to the darkness that had claimed it long before we arrived. In the end, we fled in the dead of night, leaving behind our belongings, our dreams, and a piece of our sanity. We escaped with our lives, but at a cost. The Amityville house remains, a grim landmark, a reminder that some things are beyond our understanding, beyond our control. To this day, I wake up at 3:15 a.m., the remnants of that phantom orchestra ringing in my ears, the laughter echoing in the darkness. The memories of those 28 days in Amityville are etched into my being, a chapter of my life that I can never close, a story that will never find its end.